Hello again. So at this point in our exercise, what I want to do is I want to create a couple of methods that will be handy for me to get validated input from the console. I want two methods. I want one for getting whole numbers or integers and another for getting doubles. So in our previous courses, we created a header file for that and we created a couple of global non-member functions. In C Sharp, there are no global non-member functions. Every function has to be a method, has to be attached to a class. Now, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to create a static class, one that's not meant to be instantiated, which will have these two static methods inside of it. So I can call them without actually having to instantiate any kind of an object. The math class kind of works the same way, which we're used to using. Now I'm going to do this in the same solution, but I don't want to do it in the same project. I want to create a class library. So I'm just going to widen up my Solution Explorer here, and I'm going to add a second project to the solution. So I'm going to click on the solution here, going to right click, I'm going to choose Add, and you can't see this on your screen, but I'm looking at New Project. Okay, so that calls out my Add New Project dialog box. I don't want to choose a console application at this point. I'm not creating a new console application. I'm creating a class library. Okay, so make sure it's Visual C Sharp class library, and we'll give it a name. I'm going to call mine Get Valid Methods. Oops. And then OK. Okay, so that's created a brand new project inside of the same solution. With a class library project, if I were to compile and run it, it doesn't actually create an executable. Rather, it creates a dynamic linked library, a DLL file. And then we'll go through these steps a little bit later, but I can actually include or link a reference to that DLL in the project that contains the application. For now, what I'm going to do though, I'm just going to focus in on the actual project. So it created a class, a public instance class called class 1. I don't like that name. We're going to be making some modifications to that. And it's also named my source code file class 1, which I'm not fussy on either. I'm going to rename the file name getValid. Okay, and yes, and that has also changed the name of my class to getValid. I do want it to be a public class, that makes sense, but I want it to be a static class, meaning that it's only going to contain static methods. I never have to actually, it's not used for creating objects. Okay, I'll add a little summary. All right, so we're ready to go. The first method that I'm going to create, and I'm not going to, type out the whole thing while you're watching me here because we've looked at how to do this kind of thing a couple of times. But the first method that I'm going to create is going to be a static method that's part of this class that will called whole number, which is going to get us validated input for integers. Okay, so we'll have a look at the completed method. A summary tag, a method to get a validated integer from the console. It's a public method, it's static, it returns an integer, it's called whole number. It has two parameters, a minimum and a maximum, that's for the domain validation. And by default, it's going to accept anything that will fit in an integer. So meaning the int.min value and int.max value. These are constants built into the integer data type in .NET that you can make use of. Okay, so internally, and there's lots of different ways I can do this. I've already shown you a project example where we've done validated input. So I've just picked one of the ways of doing it and went with it. I create a string called user input. I have an integer called number returned, which is the actual converted numeric value. I get the user input from the console. Notice there's no prompt in here, so I'm going to have to prompt external to this function. I try to parse that user input into the number returned using as an integer. If it doesn't work, I tell the user there's a problem. their input could not be parsed into a whole number. I have a little reprompt, okay? So this could only really be used, this can only be used in a console program, really. And then I use function recursion to determine, I just call the function again, pass it min and max, and set number return that way. So rather than doing a loop, I could have used a loop as well. It's a little more efficient this way. Otherwise, the number was parsed fine, so I'm checking the domain. Okay, so if it's out of domain, meaning it's less than the minimum or greater than the maximum, again, I tell the user what's wrong. Okay, the number is out of range and must be between, and then whatever the min and max is. And once again, I get them to try again and use function recursion to restart the function. And eventually, they've gone through, everything will check out, and it will return the validated value back to the process which invoked this. So that's the whole number method. I'm going to create a second one called real number, which is essentially going to do the same thing, but for doubles. Okay, I'm not going to step through this quite as much because it's exactly the same. The only difference, of course, is it's called real number, and then I'm using doubles instead of integers. What I've set for the minimum value is actually negative the maximum value. That's just a little bit different there, because doubles, it's not that I want a really small fraction. It's that I want the negative of a very large number. At any rate. So yeah, I've made those changes. I'll just scroll through this. I think this is where you can see most of the code if you need to pause the video. Maybe I'll add a little new line there so you can see that a little bit clearer. Okay, I'll save everything here. Close that off. Just going to make this a little bit wider. Maybe I'll add a class diagram for this project as well. So right click and view class diagram. Okay, and if I make that a little bit larger, it's not a ton to see, but oops. Go back here and make this a little bit larger so I can see it. There's my two methods. Now that I have two class diagram ones, I'm definitely going to change the name of these. So I'm going to go here into a Solution Explorer. Rather than do a save as, this is a much safer way of doing things. So I'm going to call this one get valid diagram. And I'm going to call this one here Cartesian point diagram. Okay, so that's nice and neat there. All right, so I'll just make sure, oh yep, I do want to save that. Save that. And we'll shrink this up so we can see it a little bit better. I'm going to go back to program now, and I'm going to try to actually use it. It's not going to work out for me initially. So I'll add a few lines here. First off, I'm going to take the original point and just set it back to origin 0, 0. And then I'm going to try to prompt the user for X and prompt the user for Y and use get the whole number business to actually try to do that. Now you'll notice right off the bat it says, oh, get valid doesn't exist in the current context. It's like, oh yeah, I have to go up here and add a using. So let me do that. I'm going to say using get valid, and the name of the namespace was methods semicolon, and it's giving me it says, oh, you don't have a get valid methods namespace. I'm like, oh, I must have mistyped it or something. And I go back to get valid and look up here to make sure I've got the right name. Get valid methods. I can even copy and paste this, but that's not what the problem is. The problem is it's not unlike including a header file in C++. It's not the using here is not replicating that. Okay, this is just in terms of resolving names. I actually have to add a reference to the actual project. So I'll show you the steps for doing that. I'm just gonna make this a little bit wider again. So on my OOP overview project. I'm going to right click on that project. I'm going to say add a reference. So this is my reference manager, and it probably defaults for you to assemblies. This is for adding various different references. So I don't need to worry about the assemblies for now. I'm looking at things that are in this actual solution. So in this solution, there is a project called that includes the get valid methods namespace. So I check that off. Okay, I say okay. And now you notice get valid method has no longer got the red squiggly underline. And if I scroll down, my calls to whole number seem to be okay as well. So that's an essential step. Okay, is you need to actually include the reference to the class library in the project that contains the application. So let's just look at this a little bit more closely. I'm using console.write to prompt for the x for another point.x equals. So there's the regular validation built into the property. Get valid is the name of the class. Dot whole number is the name of the method. And then what I'm doing for x is I'm actually specifying the domain. Okay, so negative Cartesian point limit. That's the static inside of Cartesian point. Up to Cartesian point limit. So the domain validation is going to be handled by whole number at this particular case. The second time for y, I do something similar. I'm using the y property, get valid.whole number, but I'm not specifying the domain limits. I'm relying on the actual y property to handle the domain limits business. So I'm doing those two different ways just to show you two different ways. Now, of course, once we actually do that, we want to be able to see something. So I want to see the distance between the origin point 0, 0 and whatever it is that the user typed in. Okay, so that's a copy and paste from what we did before. The distance between the point and another point is, and then the distance. So let's try running that. All right, so the distance between 0, 0, 3, 4 is still 5, 99 and 90, 99, 99, 99, 98 is 1. Now it's prompting me for x. We'll start off with something that's valid. I'm going to say 33, 44, and 0, 0, and 33, 44 is 55, which I believe is correct. I'm going to run it again, and I'll put in something invalid for x, like traditional chicken. Chicken could not be parsed into a whole number. So the actual static method whole number is taking care of that validation. If I put in 1, 2, 3 chicken, again, still, no, can't be parsed into a whole number. Try again. I'll put in 1,000, excuse me. And we can see here that the whole number method is still taking care of that domain validation. Needs to be between negative 99 and 99. So I'll put in 99. Okay, now I'm moving on to y. Okay, and I could do the same thing, 1, 2, 3, chicken, and I'm going to get the same thing. It's the same method, I should say. This time I'll put in what was it, 10,000 I think I did before. But because the actual method whole number is not taking care of the domain validation, it's relying on the y property to do that. So the behavior is going to be different at this point. I'm getting my system out of argument out of range exception from y handling that. I'll run it one more time. So we said 99, I'll do 97. And the distance is between 0 and 99, 97 is 138.6. I'd actually have to do the math to make sure that that's right, but it seems about right. Okay, so that is adding in a class library as well as just using user input for my Cartesian point class. That concludes this exercise. Thank you very much.